This is Hannibal back here from the Hannibal TV.com, and I am going to do a review of Dave Meltzer's report on the career of Virgil, who I've interviewed. And there's, I think, two or three other interviews of Virgil on this channel through various reporters that I work with. So search up Virgil the Hannibal TV if you want to see more of him. I don't think Meltzer was a fan of his, but he does go through the career very well. But and again, there's a lot more in the Wrestling Observer for people that wanna get it. I just skimmed through stuff, and I did almost an hour report on Ole Anderson, his his career from about an hour ago. If you want to look that up to know more about him, who also passed away this week. This one's going to be a lot shorter. His real name is Mike Jones. And he had a successful career for quite a while under the name Virgil and Vincent. Those names were given to him due to, according to Meltzer, pettiness of wrestling promoters. Virgil, and again, that was allegedly because when he started in WWF, Virgil Runnels, Dusty Rhodes was booking WCW, and there was rumors he didn't like black people, so they gave this black servant gimmick to Virgil. That's from what I understand from the shoot interviews that I've heard. That's me, Devin Nicholson, what I've heard. And Vincent in WCW was just a shot at Vince McMahon. I would say I wouldn't call those pettiness. I mean, that's just more funny, I would say. That's my opinion of that. Like to give him the names of each. I wouldn't necessarily call that petty. He passed away on February 28th at 72. And I do think he had some talent and a great look, at least when he debuted in WWE. Apparently, while most list his birthday as April 6th, 1962, his family has stated that while the day is correct, he was actually born in 1951. He was known as Virgil in WWF from 87 to 94, with a brief return in 95. The name was given to mock Dusty Rhodes. The idea of Virgil being a black man servant to Ted DiBiase, the $1 million man whose character was based on Vince McMahon. From 96 to 99, he went to WCW as Vincent, the company's way of knocking McMahon. I also think they were hiring everybody that had been in WWE that didn't have heat with WCW, not just Virgil. Uh, he goes on to say, in the case of WWE, well, the name was meant as a rib, the character of the muscular bodyguard and servant who would eventually turn on his master was an obvious logical role. The WCW role was more of an inside rib. Later in WCW, his name was Shane. He was also Curly Bill. One other thing I'll say about WCW, and again, I'm reading Meltzer stuff, but I'm just telling you, I was a huge Virgil. I'm very familiar with his career because at the time he was wrestling in the major leagues was the time I was following it very closely. And from what I understand from listening to Bischoff talk about Virgil, he's a very reliable guy. A lot of wrestlers are unreliable. I can tell you that from firsthand experience being in the business since 2001. He had a name. People, when you flip through the channels, you recognize him. Or at house shows, Virgil even said this in an interview with me. If Bagwell, who's unreliable, isn't going to show up, they call Virgil. He'll get on the next flight down there to replace him. He's a reliable hand that is better than a local jobber to use, and as you'll see in all of his interviews on this channel, he never says a bad word about anybody. So, I mean, if you never talk badly about anyone, my guess is he's probably like that in the dressing room too. So if you don't have heat with anyone because you don't talk bad about people, at least in those days, 'cause the only heat I've heard about him comes from post WWE, which we'll get into later. I mean, he's a good hand. I wouldn't necessarily call him a bad wrestler. He's passable wrestler, not the most charismatic, but he was over in WWE. Meltzer goes on to say he suffered two strokes in 2022 and had been battling dementia. In May 2002, it was said he was diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer. His sister said he had two strokes but did not have cancer. And his Twitter was run by these guys, the Megan boys, who also used to run Iron Sheik's Twitter. It was not actually Virgil. And my dealings with them, let's just say, I don't hate them, but they're your typical wrestling promoter. Jones was born in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania, was a defensive back for Virginia Union University. After college, he went into bodybuilding, and after meeting Tony Atlas in Pittsburgh, Atlas recommended that he try pro wrestling, sent him to Alpha Noah for training. He worked in Pittsburgh and on the Indies before Jerry Jarrett gave him a shot as Soul Train Jones. Jones was never much of a wrestler inside the ring, passable at best, although his long-term role was to feud with Ted DiBiase, one of the best in the world at making people look good. The belief was his limitations were fine. Maybe I don't remember. Maybe I don't remember. I never remember a bad match with Virgil. I honestly don't. I honestly don't. I've seen a lot worse. I would say you could call Outback Jack passable, barely passable, and I guess Outback Jack ultimately wasn't passable. But there's been a lot worse. What's his name there? Top Dollar. He's passable. Actually, he's not passable. I wouldn't even call Top Dollar passable. He just has a decent look and gets opportunities, even though he's horrible. Jones got a decent push in Tennessee. Sid told the story that he ended up getting that he got fired in Tennessee for sucking his own dick. If that's true or not, I don't know. He held the international title in Tennessee, beating Big Bubba Fred Ottman January 4th, 1987. He also held the Southern titles with Rocky Johnson. He did some WCW, or sorry, he did some WWF matches in '86, working underneath as Luscious Brown before debuting as SummerSlam '87 as Virgil. He became well-remembered character wearing outfits with no sleeves that accentuated his muscular arms. He would help out DiBiase, who was the top heel in the company at the time. DiBiase would threaten those who would cross him with Virgil, who would look menacing. In time, the obvious happened as DiBiase would start taking more and more advantage of Virgil. They did a log build before finally doing the turn. I remember that when I was a kid. My dad always used to say, you know, he's going to turn on him one day. Eventually, Virgil did turn on DiBiase, became a singles babyface in '91. The SummerSlam '91 show, Virgil finally beat DiBiase to win the $1 million belt. I remember seeing them on a house show here in Ottawa. DiBiase and Jones were friends during this period, with Jones noting they were together almost every day for years. The killer WWE talent schedule, and they never fought at that time. And they also had the luxury of being on Vince McMahon's $1 Million Man gimmick payroll, where they got the first class flights and hotels and shit. Years later, they did have a falling out. Jones would make bookings for indie shows and conventions where he would say he and DiBiase were coming, but he did not have DiBiase's permission. It would help Jones get bookings since he was the bigger star. But then DiBiase would not end up showing up and promoters would get mad. DiBiase claimed he had no knowledge. I like Ted DiBiase, but do we really trust Ted DiBiase at this point with all of his embezzlement accusations out there and the crap that his sons have got into? Apparently, going back to WWE, Meltzer says obviously the problem was after the program with DiBiase ran its course, there was no more real fuel to the Virgil character. One thing I remember about Virgil is he beat Bastion Booger in his debut, and at that time, nobody lost their debut, but Bastion Booger lost his debut match to Virgil, and I could not believe that. That's the main thing I remember, other than the WrestleMania 7 match against Million Dollar Man and Piper doing his gimmick with Virgil being the one to encourage Virgil to stand up for himself. Apparently, everyone in wrestling believed his fake birthday, and he looked young enough to pull it off. Because I guess he'd been saying his fake birthday for a long time. He also told a lot of people he was a math teacher, which people have looked into it, and there's no record of him being a math teacher. Uh, in 1994, his gimmick had run its course and he was out of WWE, but the character was for the rest of his life. People knew who he was. Became a meme later in his life, with people making fun of him for being the world famous Virgil. He would show up at wrestling conventions he's never booked at and set up a table. Usually promoters would let him. To me, that's smart. To me, that's making money. You gotta hustle. But obviously he wasn't good with money. I don't know how he lost all of his money. Life can be hard. In 96, he started using the name Vincent in WCW. He also they says there was two characters at the time that were McMahon spoofs. Meltzer says since Mike Rotundo was using the name VK Wall Street after Vincent's first and middle name, Vincent Kennedy. I mean, why not? The VK Wall Street. He never really was over in WCW ever, Mike Rotundo. I mean, you could say the Varsity Club may have been somewhat over, but that was more NWA. Everyone remembers Mike Rotundo as IRS. And by the way, there's shoot interview clips of Mike on this channel that I bought. He seems like a great guy. In WCW, Vincent was put into the NWO group with DiBiase, who has retired, but he was the spokesperson in character. I'll just take a quick detour to say DiBiase at WCW was so bad. He was useless, absolutely useless. Glad he made a lot of money. Remember when they had DiBiase manage the Steiners? Please explain to me how that made any sense. So Vincent was head of security for the NWO, which generally meant he would take beatings from the baby's faces when the big stars escaped unscathed and kept their heat, but it gave the baby faces someone to beat on. Hey, I'd take that job for 150 grand a year, which is what he made supposedly in the 90s, which would be even more now with inflation. When DiBiase was removed from the NWO, Vincent would go on to corner people like Hulk Hogan, Scott Steiner, Brian Adams, Scott Norton, and others. He remained part of the NWO Black and White until 1999, and then was given a name change to Curly Bill as a sidekick of the West Texas Rednecks group of Kurt Hennig, Barry Windham, Bobby Duncombe Jr., and Kendall Windham. Later, when Vince Russo came to WCW in '99, he renamed Jones Shane. Maybe as a Shane McMahon thing. Then he became Mr. Jones as the sidekick of Ernest Miller. He was let go in 2000, so he had a good run in WCW. His last major run was in 2010 when WWE brought him back as Virgil, as the valet for Ted DiBiase Jr. The gimmick only lasted a month before it was dropped. They tried everything to get Ted DiBiase Jr. over, but he just couldn't get over. Chris Jericho brought him into AEW in 2019 and 2020 as Soul Train Jones, a second for Jericho's inner circle group, essentially the new Ralphus, comedy sidekick Jericho used in WCW. You see, and here's the last part that I don't think Meltzer has this correct. Jones got a college degree and at one point taught high school math during the week and did conventions on weekends after his time in WCW ended. I've had people look up where he claims to have taught high school math, and like, there's no proof of it. People have looked up. Just think about how destitute he was at the end. If the like you get, I don't know what you get paid in the States, but in Canada here you get paid decent as a teacher. And if he actually had the ability, or who knows if he even got his degree, but like if you have a degree and are able to teach high school, you shouldn't be living in somebody's basement with everything in one room. Plus doing wrestling conventions on weekends, like where would his money have possibly gone? Plus getting GoFundMe's and stuff. It just doesn't make sense. Low Nelson. I wish WCW would be back too. AEW is definitely not on WCW's level, but it's great that there's two companies now and a lot of wrestlers are making a crap load of money. I just wish that I could have access to some of that money for all the years I've spent in the business. And yes, I will say I'm a better wrestler than a lot of guys on those rosters, and I'm a decent interviewer. And please put your memories of Virgil in the comments. I liked the guy in my dealings with him, other than dealing with his agents. I was supposed to get an interview with him several times, and his agents canceled the interview. These Megan Boy guys, so they got heat over me for canceling those and the Iron Sheik thing. They can they I don't think they were in it for the help of their talent unless they were promoting something where they were going to benefit from it. And they obviously were going to use the Twitters and so forth to promote their own stuff. And obviously, Virgil, despite being a quote unquote math teacher, he was not on social media at all in real life. I think someone told me he only had a flip phone. Um, and Iron Sheik didn't know how to use computers either. So those guys getting their permission to run their accounts, it's an easy task for them. So thanks for tuning in. Please give this video a like. Rest in peace, Virgil. I will definitely always remember you as $1 Million Man's bodyguard, and that was a golden age of wrestling for me, the '80s.